don't do drop shipping, do this instead. This is coming from someone that's done multiple hundreds of thousands a month from drop shipping in the past. And over the last 3 years, I've transitioned to fully branded. This is really even before the last 3 years, but in the last 3 years of doing this, I've done over $60 million in sales. I'm looking to do over $50 million in sales for this 2025 year. And the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I see a lot of really good brand owners sticking into drop shipping and not understanding what the flaws are of that model and how you can transition. So I wanted to make this video for the people that are scaling doing drop shipping. So if you're doing above $50,000, $100,000 a month, all the way up to millions a month, I want to talk to you guys in this video specifically. But also I want to talk to you guys if you're a beginner and you've been looking at these different business models, you've been evaluating drop shipping versus branded drop shipping, which is what a lot of people are calling it these days, or just e-commerce and taking a traditional brand route. I want to really help you understand the pros and cons of each of those different routes. And to do that, I want to go over 3 main points of what the main flaws are of how I look at it with drop shipping and why it's not a sustainable model to scale with. So I want to start by saying that drop shipping is an incredible model to get a proof of concept around. So if you want to test and validate a product or a category of products, it's an amazing way to test it. But I think that's really the extent of what it should be. It should be your testing method and your testing philosophy. But from there, as soon as you have enough capital, you should transition into the branded approach. And I want to tell you the 3 reasons why. So number 1 is, even if you do drop shipping like the top 1%, which again, 99% of you guys aren't doing it like this, but let's just say you're doing it to the best possible extent. So you're creating a branded experience, so you're making branded packaging, and if you have a really good relationship with your supplier, you're even putting your logo on their product, so you have a branded experience with that. You also are using the fastest shipping lines out of China, so you're getting your product to customers within 5, but more realistically probably like 9 days, 8 to 9 days of how long it's taking you to get to your customers. You're doing all of that right. So you're doing the branded drop shipping route, right? So you think you're doing everything right within that extent. Here's the thing. Product development and product quality is at the core of a good business model within e-commerce as a whole. And if you do this route, what you're going to be lacking almost 100% of the time is a proper product flywheel development system. So what starts to happen, especially as you advertise, is you're going to have customers that are going to leave reviews, give you feedback through your customer support, and there's going to be a lot of recurring themes that you're going to see happen. A lot of customers will mention the same types of issues, same types of problems, and you can try to modify that with your supplier. But the thing is, at a certain point, you're going to need to make a custom mold. You're going to need to do something that's fully custom. And that's been the route that I've had with pretty much all of our products, is that we get to a certain point where you can work with the white labeled products that are out there, but to get to that next hump and to solve the problems that you see, you're going to have to make a fully custom product. And if you rely on drop shipping, then this is probably not even a thought that comes to your head of creating a type of product development flywheel system around this, that you can solve all of those key problems that customers will have on a recurring basis. So you're pretty much neglecting that part of the business, which I'll get into in the next points, is the foundation of the whole business model. Because if you do a lot of what I talk about, where you want to have a subscription component to your business, a recurring component to your business, then product quality is really at the forefront of that, because product quality will determine if customers want to continuously buy from you and what the churn percentage of customers will be that continue to buy again and again. That's going to come down to the quality of your product, right? That's number 1. Number 2 is your Amazon listing. So your product quality, which is really it's very hard to do fake reviews. And if you do fake reviews, you're probably going to get your Amazon listing suspended. So highly recommend against even trying to do anything against that. But what that means is that real customer feedback is at the top of having a successful listing on Amazon. Again, if you don't have a good product quality, your reviews on Amazon are going to be shit. And if your reviews on Amazon are going to be shit, then your Amazon listing is going to be shit, which I'll get into in one of these next points over here a little bit more. So point of the matter is, if you rely on this model at scale, even if you're doing it at the top percentage of people that are doing drop shipping, which again, most of you guys are doing 15-day shipping and have zero branding on the actual product itself. Most of the drop shippers are doing it like that. Obviously, you're not going to create a good customer experience and a good product. So number one is just overall product quality and product experience. You're pretty much neglecting that part of the business, which is really the fundamental piece of your entire business model, is your product, ultimately, of what you're selling to customers. So that's point number one against scaling with dropshipping. Point number two then comes down to what I was talking about, which is your subscription component of your business model, the recurring aspect of your business. So trying to predict how much customers will buy from you again and again. And if you're doing drop shipping, it makes it very difficult to do this model, because usually if you're going to have a recurring component to your business, it's going to come in the form of a consumable product, which I highly recommend against doing any type of consumable product in China, just because you can't really vet those ingredients that they're using. Because if they're using different ingredients, most likely it's going to be blink or less of that ingredient. And it's very hard to actually vet that they're using it consistently. You can do like third-party tests, but over a long enough time horizon, it's very hard to trust that the ingredients are going to be as much quality as if you were to do it locally. So locally being in the US, or if you're in Europe, I'm sure there's a lot of great manufacturers over there. But if you're going the consumable route, it's very important to do that domestic, I would say, where you can have a better pulse on what are they using, get that tested, make sure that everything is safer, high quality ingredients. And that's not to say that it doesn't happen in the US as well. I just think it's much less likely and it's much more restrictive with those types of ingredients. So with drop shipping, again, it's much more difficult to have those components within your business model, because even if you're selling a physical device or something along those lines and you want to like tack on another product that can be consumable, it's going to be, again, very difficult to have that recurring aspect to the business. So by doing drop shipping, you're pretty much saying, I don't want to have a subscription component to my business, which for me, if you guys have seen some of my other videos, that's the fundamental component of how I'm looking at the business model of e-commerce as a whole these days. Because what that does is it starts to create predictability within your revenue and within your cash flow, that you can start to have just a unfair advantage in terms of scaling. Plus, you also can start to rely on your lifetime value of a customer. So your numbers, which if you were relying on average order value to acquiring your customers and looking that against your cost of acquisition, now you can start to use lifetime value once you start to have that predictable model, which means you're going to be able to spend more than your competitors on paid ads. So it gives you an unfair advantage, which if you rely on drop shipping, you're pretty much saying, okay, I don't want to have a subscription component to my business model, or a proper subscription component to my business model. Point number three is then Amazon, which I already alluded to a bit earlier. But Amazon is, just going off the points that I said, if you rely on drop shipping, then you first off can't use FBA, right? Unless you're going to supply it with inventory, which at that point you're not really doing drop shipping anymore because you're supplying inventory, right? FBA literally doubles, sometimes triples the conversion rate you'll have on an Amazon listing. So even if you get through the first humps, which I said, where, you know, maybe your product quality is good enough and customers are still leaving good reviews and you want to still use an Amazon listing, you still are going to be neglecting using FBA, which means your Amazon listing is going to convert at 50% of the rate it would if you had FBA. And again, also with drop shipping to supply, I'm honestly not even sure if you could supply Amazon if you have a drop shipping listing, but even if you can, the point is it's not going to be as efficient part of your business as if you had branded stock and you were sending that over to Amazon, which again, you know, why this is so crucial and why it's so important, if you haven't heard about me talk about this in other videos, is that Amazon, if you have a good listing, can do 20% all the way up to 40% or even more, to be honest. I've seen listings go above 50%, 60% of whatever sales that you're doing from your other paid acquisition channels. Using Meta as an example, let's say you do $100 on a sale on Meta, you can expect that for every $100 you do there, you'll do between $20 to $40 on Amazon at extremely high returns on ad spend. So it's not, even if you're doing a 2 return on ad spend on that $100, so you're spending $50 to do $100 on Meta, the difference is On Amazon, you're going to do that additional, let's just call it $40 there, but you're going to do it on a 10 return on ad spend. So you're only gonna have to spend $4 additional to make that additional $40. So that gives you, again, a extremely unfair advantage when you're trying to scale against competitors, because if you have a good Amazon listing, good product that you now know you have a subscription component towards, and you're giving customers a good experience, all of that will tie together to allow you to outcompete the dropshippers in your space. Because you taking the branded route also, not to mention, I guess a bonus point on all this, on point number one, which I should have mentioned earlier, is that you can also bring your cost of goods way, way down. Because when you start to order inventory in bulk, if you're drop shipping, you're probably spending 2-3 times the amount on inventory, versus if you order in bulk, order huge quantities of inventory. Obviously you have to have cash, so you have to be in this game long enough to be able to start to do that. But when you start to do that in bulk, you start to save a lot on your cost of goods. So overall, you're making more profit because you're saving on that cost of goods. You're making additional revenue because now you can actually utilize and harness Amazon to its full capacity. So you're making that additional revenue there. And number three is that you can now start to actually build a predictable and reliable recurring revenue stream, because you're not relying on drop shipping. So those reasons all come together as to why drop shipping is not a business model to actually scale based on. It's a good business model to see, okay, does this product work? Does it not work? But it's not a business model that I would look to scale on. And a bonus point on all this is when you look at what is the core value of actually what you're building, e-commerce is not a business model that is the best for cash flow. Although it can be very good for cash flow, don't get me wrong. And especially if you're doing drop shipping, it might be better for cash flow because obviously you're not having to front cost on inventory and all that. So that's an advantage that drop shipping has. But the reason why you should be doing e-commerce, or do e-commerce, I would say, the right way, is because of the valuation and the value of the brand that you're actually building. The real money in e-commerce or building a brand is on the back end side of the exit of that brand. If you're just relying, even if you build a dropshipping brand and let's say you do $1 million in profit, right? So that would mean you're probably doing between 5 to 10 million a year in revenue to get to that $1 million in profit. Reality is, if you're doing dropshipping, you could pull a higher percentage, but you're not pulling 100% of that money out. And if you do the branded route, here's, I guess, a con to that. You probably will only be able to pull out maybe 50% of those profits that you actually do, because you always have to reinvest and front more money into your inventory. So that's a con against the branded route. But here's the big difference, right? If you do drop shipping and you do it to the full extent, you do it in the cleanest way possible, reality is it's going to be very difficult to get more than a 2x multiple, 3x at max on your business model. But reality is you'll probably get a 1 to 2x multiple depending on how efficiently you do that drop shipping model, which means even in the case where you do $1 million in sales, you might make $1 million to $2 million as a sale price of that business. So it's just not very good to sell. Now, let's say you take a branded route and you actually have inventory there, you have an Amazon listing that's supporting it, you build a subscription component and have now monthly recurring revenue that's coming in month over month. Your profit margins are higher because you're saving on the cost of goods. Your cash flow might be worse, but your profits will be higher. Now, that same business, you might actually just be more efficient just by doing that. So that $1 million would probably be at least 1.5, maybe 2 million, that same $1 million that you would make from drop shipping. So you would just be more profitable. So let's just use a more pessimistic example and say it's 1.5 million versus 1 million on the same exact business model, same exact product. Not to mention the increase in scale that you'll be able to have because you have the support of Amazon and support of the recurring revenue channel. So that's obviously a huge component there that would allow you to scale much further in the first place. So you probably would realistically scale it from 10 million in revenue all the way to 20 million or 30 million in revenue because you have the support from those other channels. But let's not even assume for that. The difference here is that on that 1.5 million, you might get on the lower end a 3x multiple. That's really the lowest, a 3 to 4x. But depending on how well you do the Amazon channel, but more importantly, your recurring revenue channel, where you now have a predictable stream of income that's coming in every single month, that might actually get you to a 5x all the way up to an 8x multiple, depending on how sustainable and how predictable that income is and how big that program is. So it's all going to come down to the recurring revenue program that you build, which is going back to that second point, which I mentioned, and why it's so important is because for the valuation perspective of your business, that's going to give you literally 5x more leverage by figuring that part out of your business model over the long run, over the next few years when you're looking to actually exit the brand and product that you're working on. It's going to give you literally 5x more leverage in terms of how much you can sell it for. So looking at this from the likely to extreme view of this is, let's say you have a really good business model around the drop shipping. So you do it properly, you do it as well as possible, and you get a 2x multiple in your business. That $1 million in EBITDA, you'll be able to sell it for $2 million, right? Over the long run, let's say in 3 years when you're looking to exit. Rather, if you did it with pretty much the way that I'm talking about, so a actual brand doing actual e-commerce, that million probably would have been 1.5 million in the first place. And if you got that 8x multiple, which again would be on the more extreme level, which would be more difficult, that's if you have a really solid, like most of that profit is coming from subscription revenue, that's where the profits are actually coming from. If you do it like that, that might be worth 12 million. So the difference is a matter of $10 million, which is a matter of 8 figures by not switching to doing the traditional route. And again, you probably would scale much further because you have way more leverage. Your cost of goods is cheaper. You have support from Amazon. You have a predictable model through your recurring revenue now. That's going to allow you to scale so much further. So hopefully by listening to this video, if you're currently scaling using dropshipping, I've changed your perspective and you guys probably have capital to start moving over into the branded route. So hopefully I've given you enough reasons why you should go that route. And if you're a beginner, hopefully what you take away from this is, I think that the difference for the beginners is that all the things on the branded route are more challenging because it's capital constrained. So you need to have money to order inventory in bulk. You need to have money to supply Amazon's warehouse with inventory. That's why I do think dropshipping is good for you to start out with and get a proof of concept and get some validation. But understand that's not the end all be all of this model. The model is to figure out how you transition into a real brand that can have real valuation tied to it so that you can sell your business for as much as possible in the long run.